Thank you for joining us here at Finovate Europe. My name is David Penn, research analyst with the Finovate Group. Joining me today is a man who needs little if any introduction, Mr. Brett King. Thanks for being with us. He's the founder and CEO of Moven. He is an author, speaker, futurist, and someone who I am quite happy to be able to have a little bit of time to talk with today here at Finovate Europe. Before we jump into it, you are fresh off the plane. You said you just flew in from Miami and on your way back to the States.
Correct, yeah. I'll be back in, so I'm actually on the ground less than 24 hours, 23 hours to be exact.
Good grief.
Which is a bit crazy, because I love London, so I would have liked to have stayed a bit longer, but the schedule demands I return.
Sure. And what's it got you moving around so much of late?
So I got the new book out, so the demand off that is sort of insane. So it's done really well, but obviously it's the right timing for a book like this, discussing sort of the seismic changes we're having in financial services right now, that's been the catalyst for a lot of the travel.
Excellent. This is Bank 4.0?
Correct.
Excellent. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the book a little later on, but first, thinking about what's brought you specifically here to Finovate Europe is the Breaking Banks podcast that's going to be coming up.
Absolutely.
I don't know, for those of you who are not familiar with the Breaking Banks podcast, it's a major feature in terms of the fintech conversation, I would say, and has been that way for, how long has it been?
So we've been running for 6 years almost.
Okay.
In May it's 6 years. So we started May 2013.
Okay.
And we're the number one fintech podcast and radio show globally. We have sort of a broad syndication base, so we syndicate across a lot of web traffic. We're syndicated on the AM band in the United States.
Nice.
Plus podcast downloads. So we're in about 180 countries, about 6.5 million unique listeners, which is pretty insane.
That's very cool.
But we go out every week, rain, hail, or shine, as they say.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And here, what we're going to be doing is, I think they're calling it the Power Hour. So we're going to sort of, you're taking it on the road.
We're going to do a panel, and that's going to end up on the show. And so we're going to really sort of try and talk about some of the geopolitical type stuff that's affecting fintech right now. So the regulatory frameworks and Brexit and all that sort of stuff, and what's that going to do. So we're going to try and look big picture today.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. And who's going to be joining you on the Power Hour?
So we got Jim Marous, and JP Nichols are both joining me on the panel. I think Dave Birch is going to pop in as
that would be fun,
as the moderator as well.
Oh, very, very good. I'm curious about, you said it's been about 6 years that the podcast has been going on. Just what sort of, when you started out, what sort of role did you hope it would play in terms of that fintech conversation?
Yes, it's ironic. When I started the podcast, I started it as a way to sort of keep doing content creation, because I was finding as the CEO of Moven, I wasn't getting the time to write the blog posts and stuff like that I used to do in the early days. Because before Moven, I came to it as an author, and so I thought, well, this would be it's going to be less time. I can do an hour a week on the podcast, and it's less time than having to put the blogs together. And then it just took on a life of its own, and it's funny. I go all around the world and I meet these people who listen to the podcast, which is I could never have imagined that in a million years. But I think we've had some really phenomenal guests on the show over the years: Boris Johnson, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, stuff like that. So I look back, and I think we've achieved some really good dynamic. We've had all the fintechs on. They're unicorns now. In their early days talking. So we've been able to see them progress through their life cycle. And so I think we've really been able to sort of catalog a lot of the emergence of fintech in a really unique way. We've done shows on the ground in Kenya with M-Pesa, on the ground in China with Alipay and Tencent WeChat and stuff like that. So I think it's been pretty diverse, but I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I love the point that you made about being able to go back. We can do this sometimes. You go to the archives in a library, and you want to go back and read the original story of such and such, and to actually go back and hear the conversations of these people about what they hope to do, knowing that they've done it. It's got to be a real treat in a way.
The ones I like, but this is my personal preference, is I like the like the science fiction authors and stuff
Oh,
like
my
that.
goodness.
You know, because that's what I'm interested in. So,
Sure.
David Brin, who renowned science fiction author, we've had him on the show. Ramez Nam, who's now with Singularity University, and or Ben Goertzel, the chief scientist for Hanson Robotics, that is the guy behind Sophia, the robot.
Good grief.
And those guys always, you know, I geek out at that stuff myself. So that's the stuff I always try and create content that I like to listen to as well.
Right.
And being in the fintech space, I hope it resonates.
Yeah. That's always, they say, a good guide. If you do something that
exactly.
really gets you going, there's a fairly good chance that it's getting other people going as
Exactly.
well. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about, if not science fiction, about the question of innovation. So I've got you here, and again, is your role as a futurist, the book that you've written before, Bank 4.0, Augmented, in terms of the idea of innovation. And one of the things that I hear, particularly out of some mainstream pundits, is a concern that innovation just ain't what it used to be. And I wonder if that's something that you agree with, or if you think that's just people a little bit too close to the glass, in a sense, to really see some of the things that are going on.
So this is part of the ideation that process I went through for Bank 4.0. After writing Augmented, where I looked at sort of the big disruptive themes, I was sort of wondering, well, is there some historical analogies for what banking is going through right now? And what I saw by researching history was that the most disruptive innovations in history all had something in common. That was, they all were based on first principles design philosophy. And so that is where you strip it back to its constitute physics, you start from scratch and you say, given all the technology we have today, how would we build a banking system if we started from scratch? Okay. And so when you look at the most innovative technologies in the past, they all follow this same design pattern. Where you have industries that iterate slowly, then you get positive changes over time, but not as quickly and not as dramatically as you see with first principles design. And so I was looking for evidence if there's first principles design appearing in financial services. And the big thing that I found was that the product structures we have, particularly in retail banking, but the same exists for other areas of financial services, that were built for distribution through the branch and through face-to-face mechanisms, don't translate well to the technology world. So as you start thinking about voice-activated, home speaker systems, smart speakers, and how that will evolve into personal AIs, and then smart glasses in a few years that we'll use with a head-up display, what you realize is a credit card doesn't fit on those technologies. Credit does, but as you start to think about how to give access to credit contextually, you strip away the credit card product structure, the overdraft product structure, and you just think about delivering the utility of credit through that technology layer. And so in places like in Kenya, in M-Pesa, with M-Pesa, or with Alipay and Tencent in China, you see this type of utility, experience-led approach from a design perspective. They haven't taken the products that are typical in a retail bank in a branch and reframed them on a new channel. They've rethought the experience, and that was the aha moment for me.
Wow, that's really interesting. And you mentioned Africa and Asia, and I would imagine in some parts of Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, you've been for some of the similar sorts of things where you've had a post-communist, so you really do have the opportunity to go back to basics in a sense.
And I think if you are coming at this from a greenfield perspective, like those markets, then you can also enable behavioural change more rapid. So here in the UK, for example, or in the US, if you're trying to get mobile payments adoption, you've got to stop people writing checks, you've got to stop them using plastic, you've got to stop them using cash, and all of those systems have inertia. Whereas in China, they only had cash. They really didn't have card adoption. They certainly didn't use checks. And then you throw in like Chinese New Year with the red packets, and you put that on a mobile wallet platform, and suddenly you can enable network effect and stimulate behavioural change quite rapidly. And so there's a lot of mechanisms to it, quite interesting, but when you have greenfield, you can tend to create more innovative change and behavioural shift faster.
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious, given that we are in the UK and that the United States across the pond, what do those lessons, or what do those experiences and those other places mean for those of us trying to innovate here in the States, in the UK? Is that, how do we accomplish that if it really requires that much stripping back to get to it?
So I think UK had the right idea with the FinTech Charter, and as a result of that type of infrastructure and that type of regulatory approach, they attracted a ton of talent into London City in particular, and a lot of investment with it. In the US, the absence of regulatory change is now starting to be quite obvious in terms of the US's cycle in terms of the FinTech adoption. And then, of course, you've got China, right, where 70% of the Chinese population have used a fintech. And so China's in a whole different ballgame. But I think I'm quite bullish on London, although the Brexit's going to throw a curveball into that. But I think that regulatory approach really made London City particularly stand out.
Oh, very, very interesting. Yeah, and I'm definitely going to be looking forward to some of those conversations, those big picture conversations during the Power Hour. I like a lot of folks, spend a little bit more time than I used to paying attention to British politics and just wondering how they're going to get out of this one. It's very tough, and it's going to be interesting to hear how you all talk about it, again, from a fintech perspective and some of the effects there.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for sitting down and talking with you. I could talk with you all day with some of the things that I've had the opportunity to read from you and hear from you. So again, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Looking very much forward to the Power Hour later on, and thank you very much for joining us as well.
Thank you.